Okay, I think that since it's precisely 3 p.m. right now, I think we're just going to begin with the webinar. So first of all, I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar. It's ISIL's very first webinar, and it is actually titled Pursuing a Career in International Law with Prof. Hikmahanto Juwana, or as you may know, Prof. Hik for short, in addition to the goal of pursuing academia. So I'm sure that all of you, or at least most of you, are already familiar with Prof. Hik. But before we proceed, I would like to inform you guys briefly regarding Prof. Hik's background. So as you can see on the screen itself, he obtained his bachelor's degree or sarjana hukum from Universitas, and then later his master's degree in international law from in Japan, and then also his doctorate degree from University of Nottingham in the UK. And career-wise, which you can also see in the screen, he had experiences practicing as a legal attorney in, for example, in Oce Kaligis Law Office and Lubis Gani Surawijoyo Law Firm. He has also ample of experiences in international law, such as being the special staff to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, just to name a few. And he was also, of course, the Dean of the Faculty of Law in Universitas Indonesia, and he also took several roles as an independent commissioner in several companies such as Bluebird and Unilever. And so without further ado, for the next 30 minutes or so, we will begin our discussions with Prof. Hik regarding pursuing a career in international law. And I would like to remind participants that at the bottom. So I think we will proceed with our webinar now. Hi, good afternoon, Prof. Hik.
Hi, how are you, Naila?
Hi, I'm good, Prof. How are you?
I'm fine. And how are you all out there?
Well, we're all fine. We're good, and I hope that the participants are doing well as well.
Yeah.
For this webinar, we'll be asking you some background questions regarding your international law experiences, such as like the studies as well, and also career-wise. So I think that for this webinar, it'll be more of like a talk show. So I'll be asking you some questions, and then you can add on if you'd like. So I guess that proceeding with the first question, so what actually is international law? I mean, did you immediately know that you wanted to pursue a career in international law?
All right, before I answer that question, probably many of you are wondering why is it that I'm wearing a uniform, this kind of uniform. Well, this is because I was appointed as a rector at Universitas Jenderal Ahmad Yani. And this university is owned by the Army through its foundation. The foundation is called Yayasan Kartika Eka Paksi. So this is almost my second month as a rector, and this morning I have a meeting. That's why I have to wear this uniform. And afterwards I have a Zoom meeting, and now here I am. So I apologize if I am wearing a uniform. Now, answering to Naila's question, was it my dream to study international law? The answer would be yes. Why I want to study international law? Well, first of all, when I was in my junior high school, if I'm not mistaken, it was on my 9th grade. I want to be like my father. My father was a diplomat. So first, I saw his educational background, and I know that he graduated from International Relations Department, not international law, but International Relations Department from Social and Political Faculty at Gajah Mada University. So at the time, my father was posted in New York. We have, Indonesia, have a permanent mission at the United Nations. and my father was posted there. So I discussed with my father and said that I wanted to be like him. I want to be a diplomat. But to my surprise, he was telling me that if you want to become a diplomat, a successful diplomat, don't be like me. Don't study international relations, he said. And then I said, why? Well, my father answer was intriguing because he said, well, if you enter into a debate between states, you need to have legal basis. You need to have good grounds, solid grounds. And if you are not a lawyer, then what you're going to do is just, talk, discuss without any solid ground. So he said to me, why don't you study law? I think law is much more better if you want to become a diplomat. So this is where I wanted to study law. And, if you are in the US, you probably know that law is very important. So I watch a lot of television series, movies that has something to do with law. There's the LA firm, I'm sorry, it's a LA law firm or something like that. There's a series called like that, when I was young. And I found it very, very interesting studying law. And then this is where I said to myself that I want to pursue my law degree and put an emphasis on international law. When I graduated from high school, I always pick law as my area of study. So again, this is where I started to love law and to have a big interest on international law. Okay, so that's it, Naila. Any other questions? Your mic. You have to unmute your mic.
Oh, sorry, Prof.
It's all right. Okay.
There was difficulties as well. Yeah. So from what you have said earlier, I understand that to start, you had this interest of law because of your familial background as well, because your dad was a diplomat, and that you've always had this interest to study law. But why was it international? Like, what makes it different from other branches of law? What makes you really interested in that?
Well, it is because I wanted to pursue my career as a diplomat. So I was thinking international law is best suited for me in pursuing my career as a diplomat. Even though, in my third year at the university, my father told me again, why is it that you want to be a diplomat? Why can't you find other area of job, But I said to him, I want to follow your footsteps. But he said to me, well, if you want to follow my footsteps, then there's a problem. What is the problem? Well, if you are good, as a diplomat, then people will try to say that, well, because his father is there, that's why he is good. But if you are bad, then they will try to compare between my father and myself, right? How come his father is good, but his son is not doing well? So he told me, why don't you pursue another career? And when he challenged me to that question, and then I was thinking, well, I like to teach, so why don't I become a lecturer instead of being a diplomat? Secondly, probably most of you use Professor Mokhtar Kusuma Atmaja Introduction to International Law, right? In your study on international law. So I look at him and then I started to say, look, if I want to become a diplomat, I can do it also by having my career as a lecturer. I look at Pak Mokhtar. Pak Mokhtar is a scholar. He lectured at Pajajaran University and then he became rector. And then afterwards, he became a Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I was thinking, why can I start, my career as a lecturer, and then someday, if the government wants me, I can, have my career as a diplomat as well, as an ambassador or a foreign minister. At that time, I was thinking like that, without pursuing from the bottom at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So that is my decision when I said to myself that I want to pursue my career as a faculty member, as a lecturer. And of course, because my interest is international law, I pursue my specialization on international, which I have a lot of interest. But this is the catch. When I say international law, in my day, it does not mean only public international law, but also private international law. And my father told me, he was telling me, if you pursue your study in international law, you can also become a lawyer, but a lawyer with international transaction. And then he was telling me that you can be paid with US dollars, because he has a friend by the name of Dr. Nono Makarim, the father of our Minister of Education and Culture. He was a lawyer, and then he told me that one paper he signed, he got $1,000 US. So why don't you pursue your career as a lawyer? Again, as a scholar, as a faculty members, I can do both, doing public international works, and also private international law. I was a lawyer at Lubis Gani Surowijoyo, and at that time there are a lot of transactions between countries where my private international law knowledge is very useful. So I believe that an individual only live only once, right? I mean, after you die, that's it. And then because of that, I told myself, why don't I maximize my being here to a maximum, meaning that I want to pursue a lot of opportunities. So by studying international law, I can do a lot of public international law works, even public law works. For example, drafting legislation. That's more of a public law area rather than private law. But I also do lawyering, do the private international law, but you have to have a basis on your private law or civil law. So that was the reason why I chose international law and not any other law. And when in my student days, when I was a student at Universitas Indonesia, then if you choose international law, you are considered to be exceptional. Why you are considered to be exceptional? Because every one of you, of course, study criminal law, civil law, the basic branches of law. But when you study international law, apart from the basic international law, but you also study more advanced courses of international law that use English books, meaning that unless you have good English, then you will not have confidence to enter into international law studies. But that does not mean that you need to have English as a requirement, but at least you want to study English, so that if you study English, then you can conquer one issue, one challenge, which is to master English. And then the second issue or second challenge that you need to overcome is, of course, by reading a lot of books on international.
Okay, Prof. So that's very interesting, actually. So you mentioned about like the academic aspect, but then also the career that can actually vary. So I think before we move on further to the career, as I noted that most of the participants are actually students. So can you please tell us, since you were also a lecturer of international law in the Faculty of Law of Universitas Indonesia, can you tell us what types of courses and the things that are expected to be learned, like the fundamental knowledge that could be learned by the students with regards to international law during their time in university? What are the basics that they should be able to understand?
Okay. I lost you just. Can, can can you repeat what you were saying, Jan?
Sorry.
The last part.
What I was saying was, yes. So what are the some of the fundamental knowledge or courses that you feel are necessary for a law student who has an interest in international law to master? Sorry, can you hear
All
me?
right. So if you want to study international law, uh, yes, yes.
Yes.
Now I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear
You
you
can hear
now.
me, right, Naila? Okay. Good. Good.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. First of all, you. Okay. First of all, every law student needs to have passion to study law. If you don't have passion to study law, then forget it. You will not be successful because you will feel that every day that you woke up and then you need to go to the university and study law, or you want to open your books, you will have some a kind of pressure. Yeah, that's why I always said to students entering the law faculty that once you enter to this law faculty, then you need to have passion to study law. If you don't have if you don't have the passion yet, then what I can suggest to them is to watch television, the series on something to do with law, or you uh, read novels that has something to do with law. So that's one thing. Yeah. Secondly, when you study law, it's not about memorizing. A lot of people will say that if you study law, you need to have a good memory. That is wrong. Uh, what I always said to my student is, if you want to study law, study them very well, in a sense that not only you read, but also understand. Yeah. In my days, I have to rewrite what I read and then put it in a, how should I say, a diagram, so that I can uh, understand well of what the scholars are trying to say in their books. So that's what I did, and this is to the benefit when now I'm a lecturer, because when you study that way, then you not only memorizing but understand, the basic knowledge of what law is. Yeah. For example, when we say law, what does law means? Well, it's not only legislation, because some scholars say, you need to have the apparatus, the structure, the police, the judges, prosecutors, those kind of things. But also you need to have a legal culture. But when you said law, does it comprise only civil law or criminal law? No. And then you can make a diagram that law, uh, the branches of law consist of, say, civil law, criminal law, administrative law, constitutional law, and then international law. And then is there any differences and similarities between these branches of laws? Then you can have a diagram to put that, oh yeah, what are the differences, what are the similarities between those laws? So by doing that, I did my exam well. I usually get an A because of that. But what is more important is after you graduate, then it is in your hand. Yeah, you will not only get an A. You probably, of course, will not get A. But what will you get? Then you will get, you know, if you charge your clients 1 hour for $500, then that is what you will get. Yeah. So this is how you invest your time in your student days to be able to have benefit once you graduated from the law schools. Thirdly, because I want to study international law, so public international law, so I have to have the background of constitutional law, administrative law. Yeah. Why? Because when we are discussing about international law, of course, you have to understand that the most important subject of international law is state. And where do you study state from? Well, from constitutional law. And then you try to compare between one country's constitutional law and other countries' constitutional law, so that you will understand, yeah, who has the power to conduct, the government. In Indonesia, of course, it is the president. But in other parts of the world, it is the prime minister. But who is the head of state? In Indonesia, it is the president again. Yeah, but in other parts of the world, it can be the queen, but it can also be the president. Yeah, if you look at the French system, it is the head of state is president, whereas the one who govern is the prime minister. So with this kind of knowledge, then you will appreciate when you study international law in depth. Secondly, because in my days, when we say international law, it does not only discussing about public international law, but also private international law. So I have to have a good knowledge on private law, civil law. Yeah, I have to have knowledge on family law. I have to have knowledge on contract law, which is, again, I said to a lot of my students, it benefits me when now I work as an expert, for example, on Indonesian law. Sometimes in arbitration, there's a dispute between parties, and then the parties stated that the dispute will be conducted in Singapore, but the law that has been chosen by parties is Indonesian law. The tribunal of the arbitration, of course, may not be Indonesian, all of them. Some will be coming from other parts of the world, and they need to understand Indonesian law. And this is where my expertise is being called. So I testify, I make an expert report on Indonesian law. So without having a knowledge of, say, Indonesian civil law or private law, and without the knowledge of private international law, I probably cannot testify as an expert, on these cases. So I think the two most important branch of law is to support international law is constitutional law and private law.
Okay, that's very helpful explanation, Prof. So of course that international law is a very broad field, and that the career-wise as well, it can also be broad. Like for example, as you mentioned, there's corporate lawyer, or you can become a diplomat or an ambassador. But of course, this also shows that once you have chosen a career path, it does not mean that it would be a permanent choice. It means that you can still explore other means as well, like the way you did. Like you did both, actually, the private international law and also public international law. So actually, with regards to career now, we have a question from the audience, and he is asking, if we want to pursue a career in international law, is it advisable to obtain a double degree or more than one degree besides law? For example, obtain another degree relating to information system or psychology?
Okay, good question. Well, in the US, you can have a dual degree, but within your period of study time. For example, at a university, you study law and you study econs, or you study law, you also study politics. But unfortunately, this system is not recognized in Indonesia. When I was a dean at the law faculty of Universitas Indonesia, I was trying to have that with my colleague Bambang Brojo, who is currently the Minister of Research and Technology. At the time, he was the Dean of Faculty of Economics. So I told him, why don't we have this dual degree? But unfortunately, it has not materialized. But in any case, if you look at universities in the US, you can have that dual degree. In Indonesia, you have to finish your say law degree first, and then if you want to study econs, then you have to start studying econs. Or you can do parallel, but most probably nowadays you cannot do it within the same university. Like at University of Indonesia, you cannot do it both, even though you are, doing it in a different year. So in that sense, should we have a knowledge of other issue apart from international law? Well, to answer that question, yes, but there is a but in it. You don't have to study that other branch of area. For example, you don't have to study international relations. Yeah, but what you should do is you study by yourself. You read a lot of books with respect to international relations. Because if you're studying or if you want to excel in public international law, then you need to understand also international relations. The reason why I've asked by media to give my view on issues of international law, and they liked it, is because I'm not only discussing about international law per se, but I also try to have the view of how the international relations between countries that are in dispute. So this is where viewers like my explanation on a certain issue. But if you are talking about international law only, then viewers will say, you are not down to earth, because as if you are out there and then you discuss about this article, that article, but in reality, it is not like that, So what I suggest you do is you read a lot of book on international relations. But if you want to pursue more on private international law, what I suggest you do is you try to read a lot of business books, management, so that you can understand how people are doing transaction. Because of, after you study that, then you have a good knowledge on how business is run, and you only need to think about law. This is where we have differences between our faculty of law, Fakultas Hukum, and law school in the US. Because in the US, you don't study law after you graduate from high school. It is not a first degree. Yeah. In the US, when you study law, it's a professional degree. And then a professional degree that you need to have an undergraduate in other areas except law, and then you study law for another 3 years. And in the US, it's good because those who want to pursue as a private litigators or having an expertise on merger and acquisition, for example, you become an M&E lawyers. Then usually those who have that kind of expertise studied in their first degree econs, accounting, because that is very close to M&E. But if you want to pursue your career as a diplomat, you can, of course, apply for law school and then apply for to become a diplomat. But they will study international relations for the undergraduate. Yeah. Unfortunately, in Indonesia, we don't have that kind of luxury, because once we entered the university, we can choose law, and then when we choose law, we study on doctrines, on theories, but not on practical issues. But once you graduated from law faculty, then of course you can pursue your career as a lawyer, provided that you undergo a special training, like PKPA, Pendidikan Khusus Profesi Advokat, or if you want to become a diplomat, then you have to enter into a diplomatic course, those kind of things. So that's my answer. So you don't have to do a dual degree, but you need to learn by yourself if you have some interest in certain area of international law, so that it can relate between the law and other branch of sciences.
Okay, well noted, Prof. So it is not always advisable, like you don't have to necessarily take, for example, another degree, like a dual degree or even a master's degree to be able to be an expert in an aspect of law. As in nowadays, there's many resources, like for example, you can read them from a book, and as you have suggested, if one is interested in pursuing a career in private international law, then they can enrich themselves by reading books regarding businesses. But with regards to public international law, then we can resort to books or publications, there's a lot nowadays, preferably regarding the public relations between states. And another aspect that you mentioned just now was also regarding the practice. And in that sense, how about, do you suggest students to, partake in, for example, mooting competitions during their high school time? Because I'm sure that we both agree that, getting good grades and excelling your classes is a very good point, and it could make you stand out from other job applicants. But I think that if a student then becomes more active in their extracurricular, then it could help them, have more competitive advantage than the other participants. And what do you say on that, Prof. Hick? Do you suggest them to also, be involved in extracurricular activities?
Yes, definitely. And I suggest that those who studies international law participate in moot competition. Why is it? Well, you study international law in your classroom. Probably you will have the same knowledge as your colleagues in the classroom. But if you do mooting, then the knowledge can be more in depth. Why? Because three things. One, to be able to participate in mooting competition, you need to have your skill as a researcher, because you need to find your laws, you need to find your cases, you need to find your treaties, and you need to find what have you. So research is very important. And this is where when you graduated, you are more likely to have the job that you wanted, because the employers know that you have this good knowledge of doing research. Yeah, not many in Indonesia do a lot of research. When asked what is international law, they probably write in I don't know, probably 3 or 5 sentences, because they don't do research. They only memorize from one book. right? But if you do research, meaning that you read a lot of international law books, because there are scholars, a lot of scholars who write international law. So usually they can say that according to, say, Malcolm Shaw, international is this, according to Starker, international is that, according to Oppenheim, international, meaning that, you know, for me as a lecturer, that this student, this particular student have done his research, yeah. Secondly, this is also very important, that by joining a moot competition, you will gain your analysis, good analysis of law. You know, you sharpen your analysis, because if you do only research, you know, for example, the definition of international law by scholars. But the question is, what do you do with that? Yeah, if you have a knowledge to make analysis, then you will try to analyze what are the differences between one scholars and other scholars. What are the similarities? Yeah, because this is what I learned from the UK when I was studying there. I also read books in the US that to become a good lawyer, you need to do your research and you need to have your analysis skill. Yeah, that's second. And then third is the ability for you to express what you have done in your research, your analysis, in writing, and also in, you know, orally. So because by joining a moot competition, you need to write. Yeah, you need to write what you have in your head into a written form, and this will be examined by the judges. But apart from that, you need to also have a public speaking ability, yeah, on how you express yourself when you have, say, intonation, and then to convince a judge, yeah. Also, probably you need to also have an eye contact, you know, those kind of thing is in the US is being studied by the law students. So these three things you will not have it have in your classroom. In your classroom, you can ask questions to your professors, but you will not have obtained these three skills. So by joining an extracurricular activities like mooting competition, actually what you are doing is you will sharpen your ability in doing research, in doing analysis, and also in legal writing, and also public speaking. So that is why ISIL is here. Yeah, I remember when I was in my student years, there's no competition like this. The competition that we have, it's you know, like moot competition, but it's more of local courts. When I look at the moot competition of a local courts, the national moot competition, everything has been what organized, you know, orchestrated, you know, because the judges are from the same university as the prosecutors, and the same university as the advocates, and everything is from the university. And then you will be give mark. You will have marks whether you are timely, whether this and that. To me, that is not competition. Yeah, that's why when I was a lecturer at UI, I got a letter from a Japanese colleague of mine, and then he asked me whether I can send students to Japan to participate in Asia Cup. So I sent students there. I sent them there, and then they compete, and then they returned. They said we lost. I said that's okay, you know, because you know, our first try, we do not have the ambition to become number one, but to understand the situation, what is in there. So when they returned, I said to them, well, next year, probably this professor will ask me again for, other students to compete. So what I want you to do is to select the students. You understand the situation there, so I need you to select, and also I need you to train them. Some of them now become the founder of Indonesian Society of International Law. There's Yanti Wirayuda, and there's also Pugo, Mbak Jika, those are the second batch. But the second batch, when they return, they have make a good rank. But then they said to me, look, Prof, you know what? The Asia Cup is nothing, it's only a mock-up. What do you mean by that? Because the real competition is in Washington, D.C. There's this Jessup moot competition. So they said to me, we wanted to go there. I said, wow, where am I going to get the money from, But I managed to find Asia Foundation, and they were kind enough in giving the opportunity for these students to go to the US, provided that when they return, they set up this kind of organization, Indonesian Society of International Law, and also try to disperse their knowledge to other students in Indonesia. Yeah, so they have done that. And now we have how many universities that are competing? Or probably sometimes 20 universities, meaning that, there is a hope for Indonesia to reform their laws. There is a hope for Indonesia to have debates like in international competition in the Indonesian courtroom. So it is not only writing. To me, this is how I reform Indonesian law. Yeah, so I urge you to participate in this Indonesian Society of International Law. If you don't have a confidence yet, you can be the organizing committee. But I hope that you will have a confidence, and then ask your colleagues to participate in ISIL with the name of your university. And most deans are nowadays urging their students to compete in ISIL, because if they won, their university will be recognized by the would-be students who wants to enter to that university. So I think that's the importance of extracurricular activities like Indonesian Society of International Law. Naila.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the explanation. So from what you've said, we could gather that, joining extracurricular activities are very important, such as mooting, because it could, add to your legal writing skills, your analytical skills, and also your public speaking skills. So you've mentioned a lot about ISIL actually just now. There's actually a question from the audience, and this could be the last question that we're answering today. What made you start the Indonesian Society of International Law?
Very good question. What made me start the Indonesian Society of International Law is because, I have this grudge, but positive grudge. That why is it in my days, I don't have this international moot competition. Probably I would join the this moot competition if there were one, in my student days. But I said to myself, well, probably at that time Indonesia was not very confident that we enter into this competition. I still remember when I was a faculty member and my students went to the US, many of my colleagues says that, look, you are dreaming something that is not going to be realized. When is it going to be Indonesia be, champion in this kind of event? There's not going to be time where Indonesia will be recorded as a champion. But you know, in 2007, one of my students became the best oralist in the Jessup Mood competition. You know, and people were surprised because she was not from Harvard, she was not from Oxford, but she competed with Harvard, she competed with Oxford, and then she clinched the championship as the best oralist.
Yes,
Now,
it's Hana Akia, right?
that's right, Hannah Askia. Now she's working in Singapore as a lawyer, but I'm hoping that there's going to be more Hannah Askia, yeah, from Indonesia, not necessarily from Universitas Indonesia, but from Indonesia. Secondly, what I want to see is for one of the universities in Indonesia clinch the championship, because you know, National University of Singapore, you know, not far away from Indonesia, I think they have clinched 4 or 5 titles as a champion. So this is what I want to see in my lifetime, that Indonesia clinch a championship. Probably not this year, probably next year, probably not the last 10 years, but hopefully one day we'll have that.
Okay, Prof. I think we're running short out of time now, so we would like to thank you very much for explaining your views on the academia aspects of international law and the types of career you're pursuing, and as well as the tips and tricks, Prof.
Thank you very much, Naila, and you have been a good moderator, and I hope that many of the viewers, I suppose, will join international law, and they also take part in the Indonesian Society of International Law mood competition.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to have more seminars within this week. There's going to be 4 more. And in fact, there's going to be one tomorrow with Miss Yanti Wirajuda.
Oh,
so,
there we go. Yes.
So please tune in tomorrow as well. And you can also check us out on our Instagram. And you can also email to us if you have any further questions. And this video of the webinar will be uploaded in our YouTube account around 1 week after this. So if you missed out on the first parts of the webinar, you can watch them again on YouTube. Oh, and also one of our webinars this week will also feature Mbak Hana Askia, who was the best oralist. So we're very looking forward to more of your participation in our webinars. So I think that's all for me, and I thank you once again, Prof. Hik, and also all of the participants for joining us today. And we hope that you find the session helpful. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.